The mountains of the Hindu Kush had witnessed 1,000 years of warfare, but they had never seen anything like this. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hendricks pressed his face against the frozen ground, trying to make his 6-foot frame disappear into the rocky soil as bullets chewed through the air above his head. Around him, 11 other Navy SEALs, America's most elite warriors, were pinned down in a natural depression that was rapidly transforming from defensive position to mass grave. The mission had been sold as routine. Intelligence said 20 militia fighters, light weapons, minimal training. Get and gather intelligence on the compound, get out before breakfast. Simple, clean, textbook. But intelligence had been catastrophically lethally wrong. They'd walked into an ambush that had been waiting for them with the patience of a spider in its web. The compound had erupted with coordinated machine gun fire from positions that shouldn't have existed. RPGs streaked through the twilight like falling stars with murderous intent. Mortars began walking toward their position with mechanical precision. This wasn't a militia. This was a professional military force that had known exactly when and where the Americans would arrive. "Viper 6, this is Havoc Team," Hendricks shouted into his radio, his voice carrying the controlled urgency of a man who'd been in combat long enough to know when death was measuring him for a coffin. "We are in heavy contact, surrounded by what looks like battalion-strength enemy force. We need immediate air support, immediate QRF. We need everything you've got." The response came back with the cold finality of a judge's gavel. "Havoc Team negative on air support. Weather has grounded all birds. QRF is spinning up, but you're looking at 40 minutes minimum. You need to hold your position." 40 minutes. Hendricks did the mathematics in his head with the brutal efficiency that 2 decades of combat operations had taught him. They had maybe 300 rounds of ammunition left between 12 men. The enemy was maneuvering to surround them, completely cutting off any possibility of retreat. 2 of his men were already wounded, one seriously. The Taliban, or whoever these professional fighters were, would overrun their position in 10 minutes, maybe less. They'd all be dead in 15. "Chief," his teammate Senior Chief Garrett Blackwood shouted from 3 meters away. Stone, as everyone called him, was 45 years old. The oldest SEAL still operational, a man who'd seen Desert Storm when most of his team had been in elementary school. If Stone looked worried, things were worse than bad. "They're moving up, heavy weapons on the ridge. We're about to get hammered." Hendricks keyed his radio one more time, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "Viper 6, if you've got anything, anyone, anywhere in this sector now would be a really good time. We are about to be overrun." There was a long pause. Static hissed in his earpiece like the whisper of approaching death. Then a voice cut through the radio frequency, a voice that would change everything. Female, young, calm as winter ice on a frozen lake. "Havoc Team, this is Guardian Angel. I have your position. I count approximately 25 hostiles in your immediate engagement zone. Stand by for fires, and whatever you do, keep your heads down." Hendricks's brain stuttered for a moment, trying to process. "Who the hell is this? Identify yourself." "Someone who doesn't miss," the voice replied. "Give me 2 minutes." Before Hendricks could respond, the sound of a precision rifle cracked across the valley, a sound distinctly different from the chatter of automatic weapons fire. Sharp, authoritative, final. The enemy machine gunner, who'd been systematically tearing apart their defensive position, suddenly jerked backward, his head snapping with the violent physics of a high-velocity round finding its target. He crumpled behind his weapon, silent and still. 1 shot, 1 kill. 2 seconds later, another crack. The machine gunner's assistant, who'd been frozen in confusion, dropped beside his dead teammate. A 3rd shot. An enemy squad leader coordinating the assault from behind a boulder took a round through his center mass and collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. "What in the name of God?" Petty Officer Dylan Ashford whispered. At 24, this was his first major combat deployment, and his young face carried the expression of someone watching reality rearrange itself into impossible shapes. Stone, the grizzled veteran, stared into the darkening mountains, his experienced eyes trying to locate the shooter. "Single rifle, long range, precision shots." His voice carried a note of something that might have been awe. "She's real." Hendricks repeated. "Guardian Angel. There have been stories in the community. A contractor, works alone, operates in denied territory. Most guys think she's a legend. Ghost stories operators tell over beer." Stone watched as another enemy fighter dropped in the distance, killed by an enemy he couldn't see. "I guess we just found out the ghost stories are real." The killing continued with mechanical efficiency. Each shot was finding a target, eliminating threats with surgical precision. Enemy squad leaders, heavy weapons operators, radio men trying to call for reinforcements. anyone attempting to coordinate the assault or bring decisive firepower to bear against the SEAL position. The enemy's coordinated attack began to fragment. Confusion rippled through their ranks like a stone thrown into still water. Fighters who'd been advancing with professional discipline started taking cover shooting blindly into the mountains, trying to locate an enemy that was invisible and untouchable. And the unseen rifle kept speaking. One shot, one kill, again, again, again. Hendricks counted 14 distinct rifle reports before his radio crackled again. Havoc team, this is Guardian Angel. Enemy assault is broken. They're regrouping approximately 400 meters from your position. I'm maintaining overwatch. When you're ready, move to extract coordinates. I'll provide cover. Guardian Angel. Hendricks transmitted his voice, carrying genuine gratitude mixed with professional curiosity. We don't know who you are, but you just saved 12 American lives. Thank you. Save the thanks until we're all home safe, Chief. This isn't over yet. But to understand who was speaking, to understand the woman whose rifle was currently rewriting the tactical situation in these ancient mountains, you have to go back 20 years to a different war, a different country, and a little girl who learned too young that the world was a dangerous place, Baghdad. Iraq 2004. Elena Katharina Westbrook was 8 years old when she learned that her father was never coming home. Richard Westbrook had been a State Department diplomat, one of those quiet, serious men who believed that America's strength lay not just in its military might, but in its ability to build bridges, forge alliances, establish the infrastructure of peace in places where war had burned everything to ash. He'd volunteered for the Baghdad posting, despite the dangers, despite his wife's tears, despite the fact that his daughter was young enough to still need bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. Someone has to do the hard work, Elena, he'd told her before he left, kneeling down, so his eyes were level with hers. Someone has to stand in the gap between what the world is and what it could be. Do you understand? She'd nodded, not really understanding, but trusting that her father, who'd never lied to her, who'd never broken a promise, knew what he was doing. 3 months later, a suicide bomber drove a truck filled with explosives into the Green Zone compound, where her father had been meeting with local Iraqi officials. The blast killed 17 people. Richard Westbrook's body was identified by his wedding ring and the diplomatic credentials in his pocket. Elena didn't cry at the funeral. She stood in her black dress holding her mother's hand, staring at the flag-draped coffin with eyes that had gone somewhere far away. People said she was in shock. Her mother worried she was traumatized beyond healing. But the truth was simpler and harder than trauma. Elena was memorizing what grief felt like, what helplessness tasted like, what it meant to lose someone because the world was filled with evil men who killed good people for causes that made sense only in the twisted chambers of their damaged minds. She was 8 years old and she was deciding who she was going to become. At the funeral, a man approached her mother, tall, lean, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. He wore a dark suit that managed to look both formal and functional, and he moved with the careful economy of someone who'd spent years operating in places where a wrong step could be fatal. Mrs. Westbrook, he said quietly, I'm Colonel Nathaniel Pierce. I worked with Richard in the Diplomatic Security Division. He was a good man, one of the best I've known. Elena's mother nodded, too hollowed out by grief to manage words. Pierce knelt down, bringing his eyes level with Elena's, just like her father used to do. Your dad talked about you all the time. He was very proud of you. Elena looked at him with those distant eyes. Did you know the people who killed him? The directness of the question, the complete absence of childish deflection or denial made Pierce pause. This wasn't a little girl asking questions. This was someone conducting an interview. No, he said honestly, but I know the kind of people they were, and I know your father died trying to make the world safer. That didn't work, Elena said flatly. No, Pierce agreed. It didn't, but that doesn't mean it wasn't worth trying. Something passed between them in that moment, some recognition, some understanding that transcended age and experience. Pierce saw in this little girl's eyes something he'd seen in the mirror after his own dark operations during the Cold War, the look of someone who'd decided that passivity was unacceptable, that the world required action, that evil could only be stopped by people willing to stand against it. He gave Elena's mother his card. If you need anything, anything at all, please call me. Richard was my friend. That makes you family. Over the following months, as Elena's mother struggled to rebuild a life shattered by sudden violence, Pierce kept his word. He checked in regularly, made sure they had what they needed, helped navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of survivor benefits and insurance claims. And he noticed that Elena was different from other children her age. She didn't play with toys. She read voraciously, obsessively. Books about military history, biographies of soldiers and intelligence officers. Technical manuals that should have been far beyond her comprehension, but which she absorbed like a linguistic sponge. When Elena was 12, Pierce found her in the local library reading a book about Marine Scout snipers in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Heavy reading for a kid, he observed sitting down across from her. Elena looked up. In the 4 years since her father's death, she'd grown taller but not softer. Her eyes still carried that focused intensity, that sense of someone perpetually calculating, measuring, preparing. "Did you know them?" she asked. "The Marines who fought at Guadalcanal." "My father did," Pierce said. "He was a corpsman with the 1st Marine Division. Saw some of the worst fighting in the Pacific." "Did he kill people?" Pierce considered the question. Most adults would have deflected, would have softened the truth for a child's ears. But he'd learned that Elena didn't want comfort. She wanted truth. "Yes," he said, "he did, to protect his friends, to stop an enemy that needed stopping." "Do you think that's moral, killing people to protect other people?" "I think the world is more complicated than most people want to admit," Pierce replied. "There are times when good people have to do hard things to prevent worse things from happening. Your father understood that. That's why he went to Baghdad." Elena nodded slowly, processing. "I want to learn how to protect people," she said. "Not with words and diplomacy like Dad, with skills that actually work when the words fail." Pierce studied her carefully. "That's a hard road, Elena. It changes you. Once you start down that path, you can't really go back to being a normal person." "I stopped being a normal person when Dad died," Elena said simply. "Now I'm just deciding what kind of abnormal person I want to be." And so began an unusual education. Pierce had retired from active CIA service, but maintained connections throughout the intelligence community. He'd spent the 1980s running operations in East Berlin and Prague, threading the needle between espionage and action-gathering intelligence that helped America win the Cold War without firing shots that would trigger World War III. He taught Elena the fundamentals of intelligence work: how to observe without being observed, how to analyze patterns and predict behavior, how to think like an enemy in order to anticipate their moves, how to remain calm under pressure and make rational decisions when everyone around you was panicking. But Elena wanted more than intelligence tradecraft. She wanted practical skills. She wanted to be able to act. So at 14, with her mother's reluctant blessing and Pierce's careful supervision, Elena started learning to shoot. She began with basic handgun courses at a local range. The instructors expected a teenage girl who'd never held a weapon to be nervous, hesitant, intimidated by the noise and recoil. Instead, they found a student who approached firearms with the same focused intensity she brought to everything else. She listened to instruction with complete attention. She practiced with mechanical repetition. She asked questions that revealed a mind already thinking about angles, distances, wind effects, the physics of ballistics. By 15, she'd progressed to long-range rifle shooting. This was where something clicked, where natural aptitude met obsessive dedication and created something approaching art. There's a purity to long-range marksmanship that appealed to Elena's precise mind. It's mathematics and meditation combined, calculating wind speed and direction, accounting for bullet drop over distance, reading mirage effects in hot weather, understanding how temperature affects powder, burn rates, and muzzle velocity. Every shot is a problem with 100 variables, and the solution is a single trigger press. Elena became, in the language of competitive shooting, a natural. At 16, she won the National Junior Long Range Championship, beating competitors who'd been shooting since before they could walk. At 18, she took silver in the National Long Range Championship Open Division, competing against adults with decades of experience. But competition shooting, as satisfying as it was, felt like practice for something real. Like training for a mission she hadn't yet received. "You're good," Pierce told her after her 18th birthday, watching her put 10 rounds into a 4-inch circle at 800 meters. "Better than good. You've got the potential to be truly exceptional." "But," Elena prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation, "but exceptional at what competitive shooting is a sport. What you're practicing for feels like something else." Elena set down her rifle, looking at Pierce with those intense eyes that had never quite learned how to soften. "I want to do what you did, intelligence work. But I want to be able to act when intelligence isn't enough, when someone needs to be stopped, and all the diplomacy and analysis in the world won't stop them." "That's a dangerous combination," Pierce said carefully. "Intelligence officers work in the shadows. Action operators work in the light. Brief, violent light, but light nonetheless. Combining both means you're always operating in the gray areas where the rules aren't clear and the consequences are permanent. I'm okay with that, Elena said. Are you okay with teaching me? Pierce was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Richard Westbrook, his friend killed by men who couldn't be reasoned with or deterred by diplomatic pressure. He thought about his own career, the operations that had succeeded because someone, often him, had been willing to do what needed doing in the dark spaces between official policy and desperate necessity. And he thought about this young woman who channeled grief into purpose and loss into determination. I'll teach you what I can, he said finally. But understand, this path doesn't lead to a normal life. Normal people don't learn what I'm going to teach you. Normal people don't develop the skills you're developing. Once you start down this road, you're always going to be someone standing apart, someone watching, someone ready. I've been standing apart since I was 8, Elena replied. At least now I'll be standing apart with a purpose. And so Pierce taught her. Not the action operator skills, he wasn't a combat specialist and never had been, but he taught her the intelligence tradecraft that had kept him alive through a dozen operations behind the Iron Curtain, how to move through hostile territory, how to establish observation posts, how to evade surveillance, how to assess threats and plan exits, how to operate alone for extended periods without support. The shooting skills Elena developed herself through thousands of hours of practice studying under various instructors, synthesizing techniques from multiple disciplines, creating her own methodology that blended precision with speed, patience with aggression. By 22, she'd drawn the attention of organizations that officially didn't exist. The recruiter who approached her didn't use government, letterhead, or official titles. Just a phone call, a meeting at a quiet restaurant, and a simple proposition. We have work that needs doing in places where official American presence would create diplomatic incidents. Intelligence gathering primarily. Sometimes more than gathering. The people who do this work operate alone without backup, often without extraction plans if things go wrong. The pay is substantial. The risks are existential. Interested. Elena had been interested. For the next 6 years, she'd operated it in Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, denied territories where American contractors gathered intelligence that couldn't be obtained through official channels. She'd spent weeks alone in hostile environments, watching reporting. And occasionally, when the intelligence revealed threats that needed more than observation, she'd acted. Her rifle had accounted for 18 confirmed kills across 4 continents. Taliban commanders planning attacks on American forces, Al-Qaeda financiers moving money to fund terrorism, arms dealers selling weapons that would be used against civilians. She'd never killed anyone who wasn't an active threat to American lives or interests. She'd never taken a shot she wasn't certain of. She'd never operated outside the parameters of her mission authorizations. But she'd also never hesitated when hesitation would cost lives. In the private contractor community, she'd acquired a reputation. Reliable, precise, capable of operating independently in circumstances that would break most operators. Her call sign had started as a joke. Someone had said she moved through enemy territory like a wraith, unseen and untouchable, but it had stuck. Elena Wraith Westbrook, the contractor who appeared out of nowhere, gathered the intelligence that changed operations and disappeared before anyone knew she'd been there. And now at 28, with 6 years of operational experience and a skill set that combined intelligence tradecraft with precision marksmanship at the highest level, she was lying on a ridge in the Hindu Kush Mountains, looking through a rifle scope at a compound that was supposed to contain 20 militia fighters but actually held 65 professional soldiers, looking at an ambush that was about to kill 12 Navy SEALs, looking at a decision point that would define everything that came after. The voice in her earpiece, mission control speaking from a secure facility somewhere safe and distant, was insistent. Guardian Angel, you are reconnaissance only. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Maintain observation position and await QRF arrival. Elena watched through her scope as machine gun fire tore through the SEAL position, watched as a young operator, couldn't be more than 24, pressed himself against a rock with that expression soldiers get when they realize they're probably going to die today. She thought about her father, about diplomacy that couldn't stop a truck bomb, about conversations that couldn't prevent violence, about all the times when analysis and intelligence and careful policy weren't enough. She thought about what Pierce had taught her. Sometimes you're the only one who can act. That's when legends are born. She thought about Rebecca Thorne, Rebecca, her mentor in the contractor community. The woman who'd taken a 22-year-old Elena under her wing and taught her how to survive in the field, how to trust her instincts, how to make the hard calls when the mission plan dissolved into chaos. Rebecca, who'd been killed 2 years ago in an operation that should have been routine, killed by Russian GRU operators working with local forces, killed while Elena had been 200 miles away on a different mission, unable to help, unable to act, unable to do anything but receive the notification that one of the few people she trusted in this world was gone. The compound below, she'd seen the intelligence photos. The enemy commander was Colonel Alexander Dimitrov, former Russian GRU, currently running a mercenary operation that provided military expertise to anyone willing to pay. The same organization that had killed Rebecca. Mission Control was still talking in her ear or citing protocols and operational parameters and the importance of maintaining cover. Elena reached down and switched off her radio. Then she keyed a different frequency, the SEAL Team's combat channel. Havoc Team, this is Guardian Angel. I have your position. I count approximately 25 hostiles in your immediate engagement zone. Stand by for fires. And whatever you do, keep your heads down. Through her scope, she could see confusion ripple through the SEAL position as they heard an unknown voice on their secure frequency. The SEAL team leader, Chief Hendricks, according to her briefing materials, responded with appropriate suspicion. Who the hell is this? Identify yourself. Someone who doesn't miss, Elena replied, settling deeper into her firing position, feeling the familiar weight of her custom Macmillan TAC-50 rifle, letting her breathing slow and her heart rate drop into that zone where time dilated and every detail became preternaturally clear. Give me 2 minutes. Her first target was the machine gunner tearing apart the SEAL defensive position, 870 meters. Slight crosswind from the east. Mountain air thinner than sea level, less resistance, but also less predictable. She calculated corrections that had become instinctive after thousands of practice shots and hundreds of real-world engagements. Exhaled slowly, pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar force. Through her scope, she watched the machine gunner's head snap backward, the physics of hydrostatic shock making his death instantaneous and absolute. One shot, one kill. The mathematics of violence calculated with precision and executed without hesitation. She was already transitioning to her second target before the first body hit the ground. The machine gunner's assistant frozen in that fatal moment of confusion that separates the living from the dead in combat. Second shot, second kill. Third target, enemy squad leader coordinating the assault, using hand signals to direct his fighters into flanking positions that would overrun the SEAL position. Third shot, third kill. And Elena Westbrook, the Wraith, the Guardian Angel, the woman who'd turned grief into purpose and loss into deadly precision, went to work with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent 20 years preparing for exactly this moment. The mission briefing had said reconnaissance only. But Elena had learned from her father's death that sometimes observation wasn't enough. She'd learned from Rebecca's death that sometimes the right person in the right place with the right skills could change everything. And she'd learned from Pierce's teaching that when Americans were dying and you had the capability to act, there was only one moral choice. So she acted. And the Hindu Kush Mountains, which had witnessed 1,000 years of warfare, added another chapter to their long and bloody history, the chapter about the day a lone woman with a rifle saved 12 of America's finest warriors and proved that sometimes in the right hands, one weapon could tip the balance of an entire battlefield. The legend of the Guardian Angel was about to be written in gunsmoke and blood. And Elena Westbrook, who'd been an 8-year-old girl memorizing grief at her father's funeral, was about to become something the enemy would fear, and American operators would speak of in reverent tones. She was about to become a ghost story that happened to be real. One shot at a time. Elena's fourth shot dropped an RPG gunner who'd been preparing to fire into the SEAL position. The rocket detonated where he fell, taking 2 nearby fighters with him in a bloom of fire and shrapnel. Unintentional but effective. 3 enemies eliminated with 1 bullet. The mathematics of combat were turning in favor of the Americans, 1 trigger press at a time. Through her scope, Elena tracked the enemy's response to her intervention. Confusion rippled through their ranks like a stone thrown into still water. Squad leaders were shouting, pointing in random directions, trying to locate a threat they couldn't see. Fighters who'd been advancing with professional discipline were now diving for cover, shooting blindly into the mountains. They were panicking, and panicked soldiers made mistakes. Target 5, a radio operator crouched behind a boulder, frantically calling for instructions or reinforcements. 845 meters. The wind had shifted slightly. She could feel it on her face, that subtle change in air pressure and temperature that told her more than any electronic wind meter could. She adjusted her aim point 2 degrees left. The shot took him through the upper chest. The radio fell silent. Target 6, another squad leader, attempting to rally his men, restore some tactical coherence to the disintegrating assault. 790 meters. Closer range meant less bullet drop, but also less time for error correction. She needed to be perfect on the first shot because giving away her exact position with a miss could be fatal. The bullet found him as he raised his arm to give a hand signal. He dropped mid-gesture, and the fighters around him scattered like startled birds. Elena was operating in that zone of absolute focus that combat shooters called the bubble, a state where time seemed to slow, where every detail became preternaturally clear, where her conscious mind stepped back and let years of training take over. Her breathing was controlled. Her heart rate had dropped to 50 beats per minute. Her hands were steady despite the rifle's recoil, sending shockwaves through her shoulder with each shot. In the SEAL position below, Chief Hendricks was staring into the mountains with an expression that mixed professional awe with tactical confusion. His radio crackled with transmissions from his team. "Chief, I count 7 enemy KIA in the last 90 seconds. Senior Chief Blackwood reported his veteran's eye tracking the pattern of falling bodies. "Single shooter, long range. This is beyond world class. This is something else entirely." "Where the hell is she?" Petty Officer Dylan Ashford asked, his young voice carrying that note of wonder that combat veterans learned to suppress but never quite forgot. "I can't see muzzle flash. I can't see anything." "That's the point," Stone replied. His 45 years had given him perspective that the younger operators lacked. He'd heard the stories about contractors who operated in the margins between special operations and intelligence work, ghosts who appeared when situations went sideways and disappeared before anyone could ask questions. He'd always assumed those stories were exaggerated war stories inflated by alcohol and ego. He was rapidly revising that assessment. Elena had moved on to target 7 and 8, a heavy machine gun team, setting up on a ridge that would give them enfilade fire into the SEAL position. The gunner and his assistant were working with practiced efficiency, clearly professional soldiers who'd done this hundreds of times. They'd never get to do it again. 890 meters. Uphill shot, which meant accounting for the angle and adjusting for the fact that gravity affected the bullet differently when shooting up versus shooting level. The kind of calculation that took most shooters several seconds with a ballistic computer. Elena made it instinctively in the time it took to exhale. First shot, the gunner dropped across his weapon. Second shot, 3 seconds later, the assistant fell backward off the ridge. Through her scope, Elena watched enemy forces trying to adapt to a threat they couldn't locate or quantify. Some were retreating. Others were firing wildly into the mountains, wasting ammunition on empty terrain. A few of the professionals, the ones with real combat experience, were trying to use the chaos to flank the SEAL position, reasoning that if they couldn't fight the invisible sniper, they could at least complete their original mission. Elena wouldn't allow that. Targets 9 and 10-2 fighters attempting to use a ravine for concealed approach to the SEAL position. She tracked them through her thermal scope as they moved through the dead ground, invisible to the Americans, but perfectly visible to her elevated position and advanced optics. She waited with the patience Pierce had taught her. Patience was the sniper's most important attribute. Patience to wait for the perfect shot. Patience to let the enemy expose themselves. Patience to accept that sometimes doing nothing was the right tactical choice. But this wasn't one of those times. The 2 fighters emerged from the ravine, weapons raised, preparing to fire into the SEAL position from an unexpected angle. Elena's first shot dropped the lead fighter before he'd taken 3 steps. Her second shot caught the trailing fighter as he spun to retreat back into the ravine. Neither man had seen what killed them. Neither had heard the shot. At 800 meters, the supersonic crack of the bullet arrived before the sound of the rifle firing. They'd been alive one moment and dead the next, with no transition, no warning, no chance to react. That was the mercy of a skilled sniper. Death arrived too fast for fear. "Guardian Angel Havoc Team," Chief Hendricks transmitted his voice, carrying a note of something that might have been reverence. "I don't know what we did to deserve you showing up today, but we owe you 12 lives. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you call us. That's a blood debt. Save the gratitude until we're all home safe, Chief," Elena replied, already tracking her next targets. "This isn't over. I'm seeing organized movement on your eastern flank. Someone down there is still trying to coordinate an assault." Through her scope, she found him an officer or senior NCO, distinguished by the way other fighters deferred to him, moving between positions with tactical competence despite the chaos. He was trying to salvage the ambush, reorganize scattered forces into something that could still threaten the Americans. He was good. Probably Spetsnaz trained. Moving with economy, using cover effectively, never exposing himself for more than a few seconds. But Elena had been doing this for 6 years across 4 continents. She'd hunted men trained by the best military forces in the world. She'd learned to read body language, anticipate movement patterns, understand how professional soldiers thought under pressure. She watched him for 30 seconds, learning his rhythm. He moved in a pattern, 3 seconds exposed while transitioning between cover points, then 10 to 15 seconds behind concealment while he assessed and gave orders. Predictable. And in combat, predictable meant dead. She tracked his movement pattern, calculated where he'd emerge next, led the target point by the exact amount needed to account for his running speed. When he appeared in her scope, the shot was already calculated, the trigger already pressing. 920 meters. Perfect center mass hit. The enemy's tactical coordination collapsed immediately. Without leadership, the assault devolved into individual fighters making independent decisions, most of which involved finding the fastest route away from the invisible killer in the mountains. Enemy forces are retreating, Elena transmitted to the SEAL team. They're dragging wounded and dead. This engagement is over. In the sudden relative quiet that followed, relative because combat is never truly quiet, just less loud, Elena could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. Her eyes burned from the strain of staring through the scope. Her mouth was dry from the adrenaline crash that followed extended combat. But her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. And when she checked her mental count, she'd fired 27 rounds and achieved 27 kills in approximately 8 minutes of sustained engagement. It was the most intense combat action of her career. And it wasn't over yet. "Havoc Team Guardian Angel," she transmitted. "I'm coming to you. Don't shoot me. I'm the one not trying to kill you." She broke down her hide with practiced efficiency, policing her brass because leaving evidence was unprofessional and because training mattered even when exhausted. Then she began moving down the mountain toward the SEAL position, making noise to announce her presence, keeping her rifle pointed at the ground in a non-threatening carry. The SEALs had established a defensive perimeter, weapons outward scanning for threats. As Elena approached, she could see them tracking her movement with professional wariness. They'd heard her voice on the radio, but voices could be deceptive. They'd believed she was friendly when she was standing in front of them, not before. She emerged from the tree line with her hands visible, rifle slung across her back, moving with calm confidence that said she belonged there. Chief Marcus Hendricks was the first to speak. He was a big man, 6 feet of solid muscle, with a beard and tactical gear that made him look like a modern warrior king. His eyes carried the calculating intensity of someone who'd survived 2 decades in the most dangerous profession on Earth by never making assumptions. "You're the guardian angel." His tone suggested he was still processing the reality versus his expectations. "I'm the shooter," Elena confirmed, her voice carrying the same calm that had steadied the SEALs through the chaos. Her face showed the fatigue of hours-long fieldwork, but her eyes remained sharp, assessing. "How many did you drop?" Stone asked. At 45, he'd earned the right to ask direct questions. 27 confirmed. Possibly more behind cover I couldn't verify. The SEAL team exchanged glances. 27 confirmed kills in 8 minutes from a single shooter at ranges exceeding 800 meters while targets were moving and taking cover. The mathematics of that performance defied everything they knew about combat marksmanship. Young Dylan Ashford stared at Elena with undisguised amazement. "Ma'am, I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. I'm a designated marksman. I've trained with some of the best instructors in the military." He paused, trying to find words adequate to what he'd witnessed. "What you just did, that's superhuman. That's impossible." "It's training," Elena said simply. "Thousands of hours of practice, good equipment, favorable conditions. I had elevation advantage, and they were focused on you, not scanning for external threats. Under different circumstances, different outcome." "Different circumstance, we'd all be dead," Hendricks stated flatly. He extended his hand. "Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hendricks, and whatever contractor organization you work for, they're not paying you enough." Elena shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the genuine gratitude in his eyes. "Elena Westbrook, and I don't do this for the money." "Then why?" Stone asked. There was no challenge in his question, just honest curiosity. He'd spent 23 years as a SEAL, had met hundreds of contractors, and most of them were in it for the paycheck or the adrenaline, or because they couldn't function in civilian life anymore. This woman felt different. "Because Americans were dying and I had the capability to help," Elena replied. Seemed like reason enough. Before anyone could respond, Elena's tactical radio, the official mission frequency she'd switched off earlier, crackled to life in her earpiece. She'd turned it back on during her approach to the SEAL position. "Guardian Angel, this is Viper 6 Actual. The voice belonged to Colonel Jameson Hartwell, mission commander at Forward Operating Base Alpha. We monitored your engagement via satellite relay. Are you out of your mind? You were explicitly ordered reconnaissance only. No direct action under any circumstances. 27 enemy KIA says the direct action was necessary, sir, Elena replied calmly. And 12 living Navy SEALs say it was the right call. There was a long pause on the other end. When Hartwell spoke again, his voice carried a different tone, still frustrated, but tempered with pragmatic acknowledgement of results. We'll discuss your interpretation of orders when you return to base. Right now we have extraction birds inbound ETA 12 minutes. Get Havoc team to the primary LZ. Roger that, Elena looked at Hendricks. You heard the man. Time to move. Hendricks nodded, already organizing his team. Johnson Ramirez carry the wounded. Everyone else tactical spacing. Watch our flanks. Ms. Westbrook, you're with me. I want you where I can see you, not because I don't trust you, but because I don't want to accidentally leave behind the person who just saved our lives. The movement to the landing zone was textbook professional operators conducting a tactical withdrawal, maintaining security despite exhaustion and wounds. Elena moved with them, her rifle ready, her eyes constantly scanning. The fight was over, but plenty of operations had gone catastrophically wrong in the final moments when fatigue and relief made people careless. The landing zone was a small clearing, barely large enough for helicopters. The SEALs spread out in a defensive perimeter, establishing overlapping fields of fire. Elena took a position that complemented their coverage, her long-range capability extending their protective bubble beyond what their carbines could reach. They waited in professional silence, each man focused on his sector of responsibility, weapons ready but not frantic. This was what elite training produced: the ability to remain calm and effective even after a combat engagement that should have killed them all. The sound of rotor blades announced the extraction birds. Before they were visible, 2 Black Hawk helicopters, coming in fast and low, using terrain masking to avoid observation. The door gunners scanned for threats as the birds flared for landing. Load up, Hendricks ordered. His team moved with practiced efficiency, ensuring the wounded were secured first, doing accountability to verify everyone was present. Elena was moving toward the second helicopter when Stone called out a warning. Contact left, 3 hostiles. Elena's rifle was up and tracking before her conscious mind had fully processed the warning. Through her scope, she acquired 3 enemy fighters emerging from the tree line, survivors from the earlier battle who'd apparently decided to make one last attempt at revenge or simply hadn't gotten the message that the fight was over. Her first shot dropped the lead fighter before he'd fully raised his weapon. The second fighter managed to get off a burst of automatic fire, poorly aimed, more panic than precision, before Elena's second shot ended him. The third fighter was diving for cover, but Elena had already calculated his trajectory. Her third shot found him as he tried to scramble behind a fallen log. Clear, Elena called out, her voice carrying that same calm tone she'd maintained throughout the entire engagement. The SEALs stared at her. Again. Jesus Christ, Dillon muttered. Does she ever miss? Not that I've seen, Stone replied, shaking his head slowly. And I'm starting to think we need to completely rethink our recruiting standards. The helicopters lifted off moments later, banking away from the mountains and accelerating towards safety. Elena took a seat near the door where she could provide covering fire if needed. As the landing zone fell away beneath them and the Hindu Kush Mountains receded into the distance, she finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Not completely. She never relaxed completely in a combat zone, but enough to acknowledge that the immediate danger had passed. Chief Hendricks sat across from her, studying her with an expression that mixed professional curiosity with something approaching awe. Over the headset, his voice came through clearly, despite the helicopter noise. Ms. Westbrook, there will be questions when we get back, Hendricks said carefully, about who you are, what you can do. Keep it vague, Elena replied. Contractor support, intelligence asset, whatever works. Fame gets people killed in my line of work. Hendricks nodded, understanding. My team knows who you are. They'll tell the story, but we can keep your identity out of official reports. As long as the legend doesn't come with a face and a file, Elena said. I can live with that. Stone leaned forward, his experienced eyes studying Elena with renewed interest. You've thought about this. The operational security, the reputation management. This isn't your first time dancing in the gray areas between official and unofficial. I've been doing this for 6 years, Elena confirmed. Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, places where official American military presence would create diplomatic incidents, but where American interests still need protecting. You learn to move quietly. You learn to be effective without being visible. Who trained you? Dylan asked. His youth made him less cautious about asking direct questions. Where do you learn to shoot like that? Elena smiled slightly. I'm self-taught mostly. Competition shooting since I was a teenager. Various instructors over the years. Thousands of practice hours. And operational experience in environments where mistakes are immediately fatal. It's amazing how quickly you improve when failure means death. Competition shooting doesn't prepare you for what you did today, Stone observed. Targets don't shoot back in competition. The pressure's completely different. You're right, Elena acknowledged. Competition taught me technique. Experience taught me to apply technique under stress. And she paused, considering how much to share. Personal motivation taught me to stay calm when everything's chaos. When you've lost people you care about because the right person wasn't in the right place with the right skills, you develop a certain clarity about what needs to be done when that situation occurs. The helicopter banked hard following terrain contours, and the conversation paused as everyone grabbed for handholds. When they'd leveled out, Hendricks spoke again. Ms. Westbrook, I've been a SEAL for 20 years. I've worked with Delta DevGru, British SAS, Australian SASR, the best special operations forces in the world. What you did today ranks among the most impressive individual combat performances I've ever witnessed. He met her eyes directly. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because I guarantee multiple organizations are going to want to recruit you after word of this spreads. Doing exactly what I'm doing now, Elena said without hesitation. Working alone, operating in denied territory, gathering intelligence, and acting when action is necessary. I'm not built for team operations. I'm not good at following orders I disagree with, as today demonstrated. I function best when I'm the only person I need to coordinate with. Lone wolf operations are dangerous, Stone said. No backup, no extraction plan if things go wrong. One mistake, and you're captured or dead with no one coming to save you. True, Elena agreed. But team operations mean trusting other people with your life. Trusting that everyone's trained to the same standard. Trusting that no one makes a mistake that gets everyone killed. I prefer to control my own risk factors. That's the loneliest way to fight a war, Hendricks observed quietly. Elena looked out the helicopter door at the mountains passing beneath them. Somewhere down there, enemy forces were regrouping, reporting what had happened, trying to understand how their perfect ambush had turned into a catastrophic defeat. Lonely, she said softly, but effective. And in the end, effectiveness is what matters. You're going home to your families. Your team's intact. That's worth any amount of loneliness. The helicopter flight continued in contemplative silence as the sun descended toward the mountain peaks, painting the Hindu Kush in shades of gold and crimson. The pilots kept them low and fast and avoiding predictable flight paths, maintaining the vigilance that kept people alive in hostile airspace. As Forward Operating Base Alpha appeared in the distance, a classified facility hidden in the Montana wilderness, its existence known only to those with appropriate clearances, Lena felt the familiar transition from combat readiness to operational debrief mode. The shooting was over. Now came the talking. She wasn't particularly good at the talking part. The helicopters touched down on the facility's helipad, and the organized chaos of a combat extraction unfolded around them. Medical personnel rushed to treat the wounded SEALs. Intelligence officers moved forward to begin immediate tactical debriefing. The base commander, Colonel Jameson Hartwell, stood near the operations center, his body language suggesting he had a long list of questions and not much patience for evasive answers. Elena stepped off the helicopter, her rifle slung across her back, her movements carrying the controlled fatigue of someone who'd been operating at maximum intensity for hours. She could feel the adrenaline crash beginning, that hollow sensation in her stomach, the slight tremor in her hands that she suppressed through sheer willpower. Chief Hendricks walked beside her as they approached Colonel Hartwell. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "whatever happens in that debrief, remember that 12 of us are alive because you ignored your orders. That counts for something." "Counts for something with you," Elena replied. "Might count differently with the brass." "Then the brass can talk to me," Hendricks said firmly. "I'll make sure they understand the tactical reality of what happened up there." They reached Colonel Hartwell, who gestured toward the operations center. "Ms. Westbrook, Chief Hendricks, inside now. We have a lot to discuss." The operations center was climate-controlled and sterile, a sharp contrast to the dusty chaos of combat operations. Multiple screens displayed tactical feeds, satellite imagery, and communication channels. Several officers and analysts occupied workstations monitoring ongoing operations across the region. Hartwell led them to a secure briefing room, activated privacy protocols, and closed the door. He was 58 with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of hard decisions in hard places. His eyes carried the weight of someone who'd sent people into danger knowing some wouldn't return. "Ms. Westbrook," he began, his voice carefully controlled, "I need you to explain to me how a simple reconnaissance mission resulted in you conducting a single operator direct action engagement that produced 27 enemy KIA." Elena met his gaze steadily. The reconnaissance mission revealed that intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The enemy force was 3 times larger than reported and consisted of professional military contractors, not militia. When I reported this and requested mission abort, I was informed the SEAL team was already inbound and mission was proceeding as planned. "That doesn't explain why you engaged," Hartwell said. "The SEAL team walked into a prepared ambush. They were surrounded, outnumbered 5 to 1 and taking casualties. QRF was 40 minutes out. They had maybe 10 minutes before being overrun." Elena's voice remained calm, factual. "I was the only asset in position to provide immediate support. I assessed that 12 American lives were worth the risk of compromising my operational security." "That wasn't your assessment to make," Hartwell said, but his tone had shifted slightly, less anger, more resigned acknowledgement. "You had explicit orders. Reconnaissance only. No engagement under any circumstances. Sir, with respect, orders written in a safe facility based on faulty intelligence don't supersede the tactical reality on the ground." Elena leaned forward slightly. "Would you have preferred I follow orders and watch 12 SEALs die when I had the capability to prevent it?" Chief Hendricks spoke up before Hartwell could respond. "Colonel, I need to interject here. Ms. Westbrook saved my entire team. Without her intervention, every man in Havoc team would be dead or captured. She made a tactical decision that any competent officer would have made, given the same information and capabilities." Hartwell sighed heavily, running a hand across his face. I know she saved your team. I know she made the right call operationally. But this creates significant complications. We have a civilian contractor conducting single-operator combat actions that resulted in over 24 enemy casualties. That's going to raise questions at levels far above my pay grade." "Then tell them the truth," Elena said. "A field operative assessed that American lives were at immediate risk and acted within the scope of self-defense and defense of friendly forces. The enemy ambush force was threatening American personnel. I eliminated that threat using proportional force. If that violates someone's paperwork expectations, I'll accept the consequences. But I won't apologize for saving lives." Hartwell studied her for a long moment. "You realize you just became a significant intelligence asset, right? The enemy knows someone was up there. They know that someone has extraordinary capabilities. They're going to want to identify you, hunt you, neutralize you. You just painted a target on your back." "They've wanted to identify me for years," Elena replied. "This isn't new. What's new is they have confirmation that the stories are real. That might make them more cautious, which serves American interests." A knock on the briefing room door interrupted the conversation. Hartwell called out permission to enter, and a communications officer stepped inside. "Sir, we're receiving reports of unusual activity at the facility perimeter. Security sensors are detecting possible reconnaissance elements. Could be enemy forces attempting to track our location based on the helicopter extraction." Elena and Hendricks exchanged glances. The professional understanding that passed between them needed no words. The fight might not be over after all. Hartwell's expression hardened. Alert status read, full security protocols. Get all personnel armed and in defensive positions. He looked at Elena. "Ms. Westbrook, it appears your day isn't finished yet." Elena checked her rifle, verified her ammunition, and felt the familiar calm settle over her, the combat readiness that came from years of operating in situations where relaxing could be fatal. "How many are we talking about?" she asked the communications officer. "Unknown. Sensors are detecting movement in multiple sectors. Could be as few as 10 or as many as 50. They're staying outside visual range, but they're definitely out there, and they're getting closer." Through the window, Elena could see the facility's security teams scrambling into defensive positions. The base held approximately 45 personnel, but only about 15 were combat-trained operators. The rest were support staff, analysts, communications specialists, medical personnel, people who'd signed up to support operations, not fight them. She thought about what had happened 8 hours ago in the mountains. She thought about the tactical decision she'd made to violate orders and save American lives. And she realized she was about to make the same decision again. Because somewhere in the darkness outside this facility, Enemy forces were maneuvering. And inside the facility, there were Americans who needed protecting. Elena looked at Colonel Hartwell, her expression calm and resolved. "Sir," she said quietly, "I think I need to go back outside." The Tactical Operations Center erupted into controlled chaos as reports flooded in from perimeter sensors. Colonel Hartwell moved to the main display, his experienced eyes scanning thermal imagery and motion detection readouts that painted an increasingly grim picture. "Multiple contacts," the intelligence officer reported, his voice tight with tension. "Estimate 40-plus hostiles approaching from 3 vectors. They're using professional dispersal tactics, maintaining intervals, communicating with hand signals. This is not a random probe. This is a coordinated assault." Elena moved to the display, studying the enemy's approach vectors with the analytical precision Pierce had trained into her. The enemy commander, whoever he was, had positioned his forces to exploit the facility's natural defensive weaknesses. One element approaching from the east where the terrain provided covered approaches. Another from the north where the facility's sensor coverage had a small gap. A third force holding back as reserve or quick reaction. "They followed the extraction helicopters," she said quietly. "Tracked them back here using thermal imaging or basic triangulation. They knew where to look because they knew where we'd come from." "This facility is classified," Hartwell protested, but his voice carried the hollow note of someone watching a worst-case scenario materialize before his eyes. "Our location is compartmented information." "How did they—" "Someone leaked it," Elena interrupted. She pointed to the display tracing the enemy's movement patterns. "Look at their approach vectors. They're not probing, they're not reconnoitering, they're moving with the confidence of people who already know the layout. Guard positions, sensor coverage, structural weak points. Someone gave them everything they needed." Chief Hendricks had joined them, his SEAL team already gearing up despite their exhaustion and wounds. "We've got maybe 15 combat-capable personnel in this facility," he said, running the brutal mathematics of defensive warfare. "Against 40 professional fighters who know our disposition. Those are bad odds, Colonel." "QRF is spinning up," Hartwell said, but they all heard the unspoken problem. 25 minutes minimum before they arrive. Probably 30, given the weather patterns. "We won't last 30 minutes against those numbers," Stone said bluntly. At 45, he'd seen enough combat to recognize when hope collided with tactical reality. "Not with half our personnel being support staff who haven't fired a weapon outside a qualification range." Elena was studying the terrain map displayed on the screen, her mind already shifting into the operational mode that had kept her alive for 6 years in denied territory. The facility was built into a hillside surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides and a cleared approach on the 4th. Natural choke points where the forest thinned. High ground positions that would provide clear sight lines to enemy approach routes. She'd seen this terrain before 200 meters from the facility, a rocky outcropping on an elevated ridge. She'd passed it during the helicopter approach, noted it reflexively, the way professional operators noted everything that might be tactically relevant. 920 meters from the facility's center. 20 meters of elevation advantage over the valley floor. Clear lines of sight to all 3 enemy approach vectors. "I need to get outside your perimeter," Elena said, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who'd already made a decision and was simply informing others of the inevitable. "Same tactics as before. I take an overwatch position, engage at long range, disrupt their assault coordination, eliminate high-value targets, buy time for your QRF to arrive." An officer Elena didn't recognize, some staff type with clean uniform and soft hands, spoke up with the kind of objection that made sense on paper and got people killed in reality. "That's suicide. You'd be completely exposed behind enemy lines with no support and no extraction plan. 1 person against 40 trained fighters. I'd be 900 meters from their assault positions," Elena corrected calmly. "Concealed in terrain that I've already scouted. Engaging targets from a position they can't easily locate or effectively return fire against. It's not suicide, it's asymmetric warfare." Hendricks stepped forward, his presence carrying the weight of 2 decades leading men in combat. "Colonel, I've seen what she can do. If she says she can hold off that assault force, I believe her. My team will hold the facility perimeter. We'll create a defensive kill zone at the cleared approaches. She picks off their leadership and heavy weapons from range. We handle anyone who makes it through. It's not a great plan, but it's better than getting overrun." Hartwell looked at Elena for a long moment, weighing impossible options with the kind of calculation that defined command. Finally, he nodded with the resignation of someone authorizing an action they knew violated every protocol, but accepting that protocols didn't account for reality. "Do it. But Ms. Westbrook, if the situation becomes untenable, you extract immediately. We can rebuild a facility. We can't replace someone with your capabilities. Understood, sir. Elena was already moving toward the exit, checking her rifle, calculating ammunition requirements, shifting her mind from debrief mode back into combat operations. She'd been fighting for hours, her body was exhausted, her shoulder was bruised from recoil, her eyes strained from staring through optics. None of that mattered. Americans were in danger. She had the capability to help. That made the choice simple. As she moved past Hendricks, he caught her arm gently. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice carrying genuine concern beneath the professional facade. "You don't owe us this. You already saved us once today. Nobody would blame you for sitting this one out." Elena met his eyes steadily. There are support staff in this facility who can't defend themselves. Analysts, communications specialists, medical personnel, people who never signed up for a firefight. They need someone to keep them safe. That's reason enough. She slipped out through a camouflaged side entrance, moving quickly but carefully through the darkening forest. Behind her, she could hear the SEALs organizing the defense, calm voices giving tactical directions, weapons being checked, defensive positions being reinforced. These men had already survived one impossible situation today. Now they were preparing for another. Elena reached her planned position in less than 5 minutes. The rocky outcrop on the hillside elevated 20 meters above the valley floor, approximately 920 meters from the facility. The position offered excellent sightlines down into the enemy approach routes while providing natural cover from return fire. She constructed a hasty hide using available vegetation, settled into a stable prone firing position, and began scanning through her scope. The light was fading, that difficult transition period between day and night when thermal optics provided advantage, but also when shadows could deceive and distances became harder to judge. Through her thermal scope, the enemy force materialized like ghosts gaining substance. Not 40 fighters, 55, maybe more. They were organized into squad-sized elements, moving with tactical discipline that confirmed her earlier assessment. These were professional military contractors, probably former Spetsnaz or similar Tier 1 forces. And leading them, coordinating their movement through hand signals and encrypted radio, was a man Elena recognized from intelligence briefings and personal memory. Colonel Alexander Dimitrov. Through her scope, she watched him pause, lifting a radio. His voice came through her intercepted frequency, speaking English, not Russian. Speaking to her. Guardian Angel, the Wraith, ghost of the Hindu Kush. His accent was thick but clear. "I know you're watching. I know you're out there. Rebecca Thorne screamed your name before she died. She said you'd come for me eventually." Elena's finger tightened on the trigger, every muscle screaming to take the shot. "So here I am," Dimitrov continued, spreading his arms wide in mock invitation. 55 of my best men. All this to draw out one woman. Rebecca was right about you. You can't resist saving Americans. It's your weakness. And today it kills you." The radio went silent. Dimitrov lowered his arms and resumed coordinating his assault, confident she couldn't take the shot without exposing herself. He was wrong. The man responsible for the 2018 operation that had killed Rebecca Thorne and 2 other CIA officers. The man Elena had been hunting for 2 years across 3 continents. The man who'd somehow learned she was in this region and arranged this entire scenario, the ambush on the SEALs, the attack on the facility as a trap. Not for the SEALs, for her. Through her scope, Dimitrov was clearly identifiable by his bearing and the deference other fighters showed him. He was approximately 56 years old, moving with the economy of someone who'd spent decades in combat operations. Former Russian GRU, current commander of a mercenary organization that sold military expertise to whoever paid premium rates. He'd killed Rebecca, and now he was here, 900 meters away, completely unaware that the person he'd been hunting was currently looking at him through a rifle scope. Elena's finger moved to the trigger. The shot was makeable. Difficult, 920 meters in fading light against a moving target, but within her capability. She could end this right now, end him. Justice for Rebecca delivered at supersonic velocity, but if she took that shot, every enemy fighter would know her approximate position. They'd converge on her location with overwhelming force. She might kill Dimitrov, but she'd die doing it, and the facility would be overrun without her providing covering fire. 45 Americans would die because she chose personal revenge over tactical necessity. Pierce's voice echoed in her memory from a conversation years ago. Intelligence officers make decisions based on what achieves the mission objective, not what feels personally satisfying. That's what separates professionals from amateurs. Elena exhaled slowly, moving her finger off the trigger, refocusing on the tactical situation rather than the target of personal vendetta. Mission first, always mission first. She could hunt Dimitrov later. Right now, she had Americans to protect. She keyed her karate. Command, this is Overwatch. I'm in position. I count 55 enemy fighters organized in 5 assault squads plus a command element. They're 300 meters from your perimeter and closing. I'm beginning engagement. Roger, Overwatch, Hartwell responded. You are cleared hot. Watch your fire. Some of our security personnel are in forward positions. Elena identified her first priority target, the overall assault commander positioned behind the main force, distinguishable by the cluster of radio operators and officers surrounding him. Taking him out would disrupt command and control, create confusion in the enemy's tactical coordination. She calculated the shot. 940 meters, slight crosswind from the east. Temperature dropping as the sun set behind the mountains. High humidity from afternoon precipitation. Her shoulder was already bruised from earlier shooting, which would affect her ability to maintain consistent form across multiple shots. She adjusted her position slightly, finding a more stable brace against the rock. Let her breathing settle, felt her heart rate drop into that zone where time dilated and details crystallized. Squeezed the trigger. The commander dropped instantly, his officers scattering in confusion. Elena didn't give them time to reorganize. Her second shot took down the nearest officer who tried to take command. Her third eliminated a radio operator who was probably calling for instructions. The enemy assault faltered immediately. Squad leaders looked back toward their command element, seeking guidance that was no longer there. In that moment of confusion, Elena shifted her aim to the leading assault elements. Target 4 was a heavy machine gunner setting up to provide suppressive fire against the facility. Target 5 was his ammunition bearer. Both dropped within seconds of each other, the machine gun silent before it could fire a single round. Target 6 was a squad leader directing his men into assault positions. Target 7 was an RPG gunner preparing to fire at the facility's defensive positions. Target 8 was a sniper taking position to provide overwatch for the assault. He'd been scanning the wrong direction, looking for threats from the facility instead of from Elena's elevated position. He never corrected that mistake. By her 10th shot, the enemy assault had completely stalled. Fighters were taking cover, unsure where the fire was coming from, watching their leaders and heavy weapon specialists drop without warning. Some were returning fire, but they were shooting blindly into the forest, wasting ammunition on empty terrain. Elena kept working with mechanical precision, despite the fatigue that was making her hands tremble slightly between shots. Target 11 was another squad leader attempting to rally his men. Target 12 was a fighter with a radio, probably trying to call the main force for instructions or reinforcements. Targets 13 and 14 were attempting to flank the facility using a ravine for concealment. Elena tracked them through thermal imaging, waiting patiently until they emerged from the dead ground. Both fell before they'd taken 3 steps in the open. Overwatch command, Hartwell's voice carried audible relief. Enemy assault has stopped advancing. They're taking defensive positions approximately 200 meters from our perimeter. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Roger, command. I'm shifting fire to suppress any attempt to reorganize. Stand by. Elena identified the fighters who were trying to establish a new command structure. Small groups gathering, leaders attempting to restore the order, coordinate a new assault plan. She systematically eliminated did anyone who appeared to be giving orders, coordinating movement, or trying to organize the chaos back into a coherent attack. Target 15 was a senior fighter, probably a lieutenant or captain who'd moved forward to take command. Target 16 was another fighter setting up a heavy machine gun on a tripod. Target 17 was an RPG gunner who'd learned from his dead comrades' mistakes and was being more cautious, not cautious enough. Target 18 was a sniper who'd finally figured out roughly where Elena's position was and was attempting to locate her for a counter shot. Through her scope, she could see him scanning the ridgeline, his rifle moving in a search pattern that would eventually find her. She found him first. The enemy's assault was dissolving. She could see it in their body language, in how they moved less aggressive, more defensive, looking for ways to disengage rather than continue the attack. They'd expected to overwhelm a lightly defended facility with a rapid assault. Instead, they were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't locate, couldn't effectively fight. But Elena knew this wasn't over. Enemy forces this size typically had backup plans, reserve elements, commanders who wouldn't give up easily. And she was right. Overwatch command. The urgency in Hartwell's voice cut through her concentration. We have new contacts, second enemy force approaching from the east. Estimate 20 fighters moving to flank our position. Elena swung her rifle to cover the new threat vector. Through her scope, she could see a fresh squad of fighters attempting to use the confusion of the main assault to approach from an unexpected direction. Smart tactics. If they reached the facility's eastern flank, they'd have clear shots at the defenders from an angle the main defensive positions couldn't cover. She couldn't allow that. Target 19 was the squad leader of this flanking element. Target 20 was his second in command. Targets 21 through 23 were fighters carrying heavy weapons, a machine gun and RPG, and what looked like demolition charges for breaching the facility's walls. All four went down in rapid succession, Elena's rifle speaking with mechanical efficiency despite the strain in her shoulder and the blur in her vision from extended combat. The flanking element broke immediately. Without leadership or heavy weapons, the surviving fighters scattered into the forest, their assault abandoned. Elena tracked them as they fled but held her fire. They were no longer a threat, and she needed to conserve ammunition for the main force. She shifted back to the primary assault force. They were attempting to withdraw, now dragging wounded and dead with them, providing covering fire as they retreated. Elena let most of them go. They were broken, no longer combat effective, but she continued targeting anyone who appeared to be organizing a rear guard or preparing to launch a final attack. Target 24 was a fighter setting up to provide covering fire for the retreat. Target 25 was another squad leader attempting to organize a defensive line. Target 26 was a fighter with a radio who was probably calling for reinforcements or artillery support. Overwatch Command, enemy forces are withdrawing. Repeat, hostiles are breaking contact and retreating. Assess approximately 30 enemy KIA. You've stopped their assault cold. Elena continued scanning, watching the forest, ensuring the enemy wasn't regrouping for another attempt. But her thermal scope showed only fleeing fighters, their retreat disorganized and panicked. The assault was over. Almost over. Through her scope, movement caught her attention. A single figure not retreating with the others. Moving with purpose and authority despite the chaos around him. Dimitrov. He was falling back, but in a controlled manner that suggested tactical withdrawal rather than panicked retreat. And he was looking toward the ridgeline, not randomly, but with the focused intensity of someone who'd figured out approximately where the shots were coming from. Even at 950 meters, Elena could see him clearly through her scope. Could see his face, could imagine the expression Rebecca must have seen in her final moments 2 years ago. The shot was there. Difficult, extreme range, fading light, exhausted shooter, but possible. Maybe 40% chance of a hit. 50% if she waited for him to pause. Her finger moved to the trigger. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. Dimitrov stopped looking directly toward her position, and then incredibly he smiled. Raised one hand in a mocking salute. He knew. He knew she was there. He knew she had the shot. And he was daring her to take it. Elena's world narrowed to that single point of focus. The crosshairs on Dimitrov's center mass. The calculations running through her mind. The memory of Rebecca's funeral. Pierce's voice in her memory. Don't let anger make your decisions. Anger gets you killed. But this wasn't anger. This was justice. This was a gust of wind hit her face, strong and unexpected. In the mountains, wind could shift in seconds, changing everything. Elena squeezed the trigger. Through her scope, she saw the bullet impact 6 inches left of Dimitrov's shoulder, close enough to make him flinch, close enough to send his bodyguards diving for cover. But not close enough. Dimitrov looked toward her position one more time, that mocking smile still visible even at this distance. Then he turned and disappeared into the forest, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd survived too many battlefields to be careless now. Elena lowered her rifle, breathing hard, fighting the wave of frustration and exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her discipline. She'd had one chance, one opportunity to end the man who'd killed Rebecca, and she'd missed. Command Overwatch, enemy has withdrawn. I'm maintaining position until your QRF arrives in case they attempt to regroup. Roger Overwatch, QRF inbound ETA 10 minutes. Hartwell's voice carried profound relief. And Miss Westbrook, I don't know what we did to deserve having you here today, but thank you. You just saved this entire facility. Elena remained in position, watching and waiting. Her shoulder screamed from the rifle's recoil. 27 shots in her first engagement, another 27 in this one. 54 total rounds fired in 12 hours. Her eyes were strained from hours of staring through optics. Her hands trembled slightly from adrenaline crash and exhaustion. But she stayed alert, ready to engage if the enemy returned. They didn't. 20 minutes later, she heard the distinctive sound of incoming helicopters, the QRF arriving with heavily armed soldiers ready for a major engagement. They found a secure facility, minimal friendly casualties, and approximately 30 enemy dead scattered across the approaches. And one very tired contractor sitting on a hillside calmly cleaning her rifle with the methodical attention to detail that separated professionals from amateurs. Colonel Hartwell personally walked out to Elena's position, accompanied by Chief Hendricks and several other officers. His expression mixed awe, gratitude, and the kind of bewilderment that came from watching impossible events unfold in real time. "Ms. Westbrook," he said as he approached, moving slowly to avoid startling an armed operator, "I've just reviewed the preliminary casualty assessment. 27 confirmed enemy kills from a single shooter in approximately 15 minutes of engagement against a coordinated assault force that should have overrun this facility." 27, sir, Elena confirmed quietly. She pointed to a body that had just been discovered in the undergrowth, and that one was trying to get close enough to throw grenades at your communications array. 27, Hartwell repeated, shaking his head slowly. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've worked with the best snipers the military has ever produced. What you've done today, first saving Chief Hendricks' team, now saving this entire facility, it's beyond anything I've seen or heard of in 3 decades of special operations. Just doing my job, sir. Elena's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. No, Hendricks interjected firmly. No, ma'am, this is not just doing your job. I've worked with the best shooters in the SEAL teams, with special operations snipers, who've spent their entire careers perfecting this craft. None of them could have done what you did today. Not once and certainly not twice. Stone had been examining the enemy casualties, tracking shot placement, calculating angles and distances. He approached holding several spent brass casings. "Ma'am, I've been tracking your shots based on the entry wounds and angles. You were engaging targets at ranges from 800 to over 1,000 meters in deteriorating light conditions, while targets were moving and taking cover. The level of precision required to do that." He paused, trying to find adequate words. "It's honestly hard to believe, even though I'm looking at the evidence." Elena accepted the assessment without false modesty or excessive pride. The conditions were challenging but manageable. Elevated position provided advantage. Thermal optics compensated for light conditions. Enemy was focused on the facility, not scanning for external threats. Under different circumstances, different outcome. "Under different circumstances, we'd all be dead or captured," Hartwell stated flatly. "You're being modest, and I understand that's probably operational habit. But I need you to understand what you've accomplished. You've conducted 2 separate engagements that saved every person in this facility and Havoc team. That level of individual impact is unprecedented in modern warfare." The weight of it settled over Elena. Dozens of lives continuing because she'd made one decision in the mountains to act instead of observe. Families who'd still have their soldiers coming home. "Rebecca would have done the same," Elena said quietly, more to herself than to the others. "She taught me that sometimes you're the only one who can help. That's when you find out who you really are." "Rebecca Thorne," Hartwell asked, recognition crossing his face. "The CIA officer killed in 2018, you knew her." "She was my mentor in the contractor community," Elena confirmed. "Taught me how to survive in denied territory, how to trust my instincts, how to make the hard calls when the situation demands it." She looked toward the forest where Dimitrov had disappeared. The man commanding today's assault, Colonel Dimitrov, was responsible for her death. Understanding dawned in Hartwell's expression. "This was personal for you. He was here for you specifically. This entire operation, the SEAL ambush, the facility attack, this was about drawing you out." "And killing me," Elena agreed. "He knew my reputation, knew I'd respond if Americans were in danger. Set up a scenario where I'd have to expose myself to save lives, then tried to overwhelm me with superior numbers." She smiled slightly without humor. "He miscalculated." "Did you?" Hendricks hesitated. "Did you have a shot at him?" "Yes," Elena said simply. "Extreme range, bad conditions, exhausted shooter. About 40% chance of a hit. I took the shot. Wind gust threw it off by 6 inches. He escaped." The admission of failure, of missing the one target that mattered most personally, seemed to humanize her in the eyes of the assembled officers. Up until that moment, she'd seemed almost superhuman, a figure from legend who didn't miss, didn't fail, didn't show weakness. But she'd missed. The one shot that would have avenged Rebecca, that would have eliminated a significant threat to American operations, that would have been personally satisfying beyond measure. She'd missed. And somehow that made her more impressive rather than less, because it revealed that she was human, operating at the absolute limit of human capability, achieving results that defied probability, while still being subject to the same physical laws and limitations as everyone else. You'll get another chance, Stone said with the certainty of a man who'd seen how war worked. Men like Dimitrov don't quit. He'll come after you again. And next time, maybe the wind doesn't blow at the wrong moment. Next time, Elena said quietly, I won't miss. They returned to the facility where Elena was immediately directed to the medical bay for evaluation. The facility physician insisted on examination despite Elena's protests. Severe shoulder bruising, optical strain, dehydration, the physical cost of sustained precision shooting. 24 hours rest prescribed, though they both knew Elena would be operational again within 12. She accepted the treatment mechanically, eating an MRE while her mind was already planning Moscow, Syria, and whatever came after Dimitrov. Ms. Westbrook, this is Lieutenant Eric Morrison, our signals officer. Hartwell introduced. He has something he needs to tell you. Morrison looked like he was about 30, with the kind of soft features that suggested his military career had been spent largely behind computer screens rather than in combat zones. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands shaking slightly, and his body language screamed guilt and fear. Morrison started, then stopped, unable to meet Elena's gaze. I was the leak. I gave Dimitrov the facility location, the SEAL mission details, everything. The room went very quiet. Elena set down her MRE studying Morrison with the same focused intensity she brought to target assessment. Why? Her voice was calm but carried an edge that made Morrison flinch. They have my sister, Morrison said, his voice breaking. Dimitrov's organization kidnapped her 3 months ago in Moscow. She was there on a student exchange program. They grabbed her, told me they'd kill her unless I provided information. I never meant for people to die. I just thought if I gave them tactical intel, maybe they'd let her go. You got 12 SEALs almost killed, Elena said flatly. You nearly got 45 people in this facility murdered. Your sister doesn't justify that, Lieutenant. I know. Morrison's composure shattered completely. I know, and I have to live with that. But she's my sister. She's 22 years old. She went to Russia to study literature for Christ's sake, and they have her in some cell somewhere, probably terrified, definitely in danger. What was I supposed to do? Tell your command, Hendricks said from the doorway, his voice hard as granite. Trust your chain of command to handle it, not betray your country and your fellow soldiers. I did tell command, Morrison protested weakly. I reported it through official channels. They said they were working on it, said these things take time, said she wasn't a priority compared to other hostage situations. It's been 3 months. 3 months of my sister being held by Russian mercenaries, while bureaucrats shuffle paperwork and have meetings about protocols. Elena considered this. She thought about her father killed by terrorists in Baghdad because diplomacy hadn't prevented violence. She thought about Rebecca killed by Russian intelligence operatives because official channels moved too slowly to stop threats. She thought about all the times when following proper procedures meant good people died while bad people operated without consequence. What was your sister's last known location? Elena asked quietly. Morrison looked up, confused by the question. Moscow, a safe house associated with Dimitrov's organization. But official channels say it would take months to coordinate a rescue operation, assuming we could even get diplomatic clearance to operate in Russian territory, which we can't because it would cause an international incident. I didn't ask about official channels, Elena said. I asked where she is. Understanding dawned slowly on Morrison's face, followed immediately by desperate hope. You could get her out. I work in denied territory, Elena replied. Places where official American presence would create diplomatic incidents. That's literally my job description. And I have contacts in Moscow from previous operations. Hartwell stepped forward, his command authority reasserting itself. Ms. Westbrook, I appreciate the sentiment, but you can't seriously be considering mounting an unauthorized rescue operation in Russian territory. The diplomatic ramifications would be catastrophic. Only if anyone knows I'm there, Elena countered, which they won't because that's how I operate. And because Morrison's already compromised this facility's security by his actions, we need to move fast before Dimitrov realizes his intelligence source has been burned and disposes of evidence, including his hostages. She looked at Morrison directly. I'll try to get your sister out, not because what you did was right, it wasn't, not because you deserve help, you don't, but because a 22-year-old girl studying literature doesn't deserve to die for her brother's mistakes. And because leaving Americans in enemy hands when we have the capability to retrieve them isn't who we are. Morrison's relief was visible, the tears streaming down his face. Thank you, I'm not finished, Elena interrupted coldly. You'll face full consequences for your actions. Court-martial, prison time, dishonorable discharge. You betrayed your oath, your country, and your fellow soldiers. That has to be answered for. But your sister doesn't pay for your sins. Nobody's sister should. Hartwell studied Elena for a long moment. You're serious about this. You'd go into Russian territory, extract a hostage from a heavily defended position, and make it back out alive. I've done similar operations in Syria and Yemen, Elena replied. Moscow will be cleaner, more urban concealment, easier exfiltration routes. I'll need 3 days for planning and 48 hours on the ground. Then Morrison's sister comes home, and he can face justice with at least that much weighing against his guilt. I can't officially authorize this, Hartwell said carefully. What you're describing would be a violation of about 15 different international laws and treaties. Then don't authorize it officially, Elena suggested. I'm a civilian contractor. I go where I decide to go, do what I decide to do, and if things go wrong, you've never heard of me. That's how this has always worked. Hendricks spoke up, his SEAL's sense of brotherhood overriding tactical caution. My team wants to help. We owe you, and we don't let that debt go unpaid. Appreciate the offer, but I work alone, Elena said. Teams are visible. Teams leave traces. One person moving quietly has a better chance than 12 moving loudly, even if those 12 are SEALs. The discussion continued for another 20 minutes, working through logistics and complications and the 1,000 details that separated successful operations from catastrophic failures. Eventually, Hartwell gave his unofficial, entirely deniable approval for Elena to take personal leave time and do whatever civilians do when they're not working. As the meeting broke up and officers dispersed to handle the aftermath of the facility attack, Elena found herself alone with Chief Hendricks and Stone. You're going to try to kill him, aren't you? Stone asked quietly. Dimitrov, during the sister extraction. You're going to try to finish what you started today. Elena didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window at the Montana wilderness, thinking about Rebecca, about her father, about all the people who'd died because dangerous men operated without consequence. If the opportunity presents itself, she said finally, I won't waste it again, but the girl comes out alive regardless. Mission priorities matter. That's the difference between you and people like Dimitrov, Hendricks observed. He sacrifices innocence to achieve his goals. You achieve your goals while protecting innocence. That matters. Does it? And Elena asked, genuine uncertainty coloring her voice. I've killed 54 people today. 54 human beings who woke up this morning and now will never wake up again. I did it to save other people, but does that math actually balance? Does saving 69 lives justify taking 54? You're asking the wrong question, Stone said with the wisdom of someone who'd been wrestling with similar calculations for 23 years. It's not about math. It's not about balance sheets. It's about whether the world is better or worse because of your actions. Those 54 men you killed today were professional soldiers attacking Americans. They made their choice. They accepted the risks. The 69 people you saved were doing their jobs, serving their country, and would have died through no fault of their own. You didn't create that situation. You just resolved it in favor of the people who deserve to live. Stone's right, Hendricks added. You can torture yourself with moral philosophy, or you can accept that sometimes the world needs people capable of making hard calls and living with the consequences. Rebecca saw that in you. We see it. The question is whether you see it in yourself. Elena considered this. She thought about the 8-year-old girl at her father's funeral memorizing what loss felt like. She thought about the teenager learning to shoot because words and diplomacy hadn't protected her father. She thought about the woman who'd spent 6 years operating in denied territory because official channels moved too slowly and some threats needed stopping immediately. I see it, she said quietly. I've always seen it. I just wonder sometimes if seeing it makes me better or just makes me different. Makes you necessary, Stone replied. That's enough. The next few hours passed in a blur of debriefings, tactical assessments, and the administrative aftermath of a combat engagement. The facility's security had been reinforced with additional personnel from the QRF. Enemy casualties had been documented and photographed. Intelligence analysts were already trying to piece together Dimitrov's network and predict his next move. Elena provided detailed accounts of both engagements, walking officers through her tactical decision-making process, explaining sightlines and target priorities, and the calculations that had guided each shot. She spoke clinically, professionally, turning personal experience into institutional knowledge that might save lives in the future operations. By the time the immediate crisis had been managed and the facility returned to something approximating normal operations, night had fallen completely. Elena found herself alone in a small room that served as transient quarters, staring at her rifle and thinking about the day that had just passed. 12 hours ago, she'd been conducting routine reconnaissance. Now she was being called a legend. 69 lives saved, 54 enemies killed, one critical shot missed, one rescue operation being planned that would take her into the heart of Russian territory. A knock on her door interrupted her reflection. She opened it to find all 12 members of Havoc Team standing in the corridor looking uncomfortable, in that way operators got when emotions intruded on professional facades. "We're not interrupting," Hendricks said, though his tone made it a question rather than a statement. "Come in," Elena invited, curious about what would bring an entire SEAL team to her quarters. They filed in, filling the small room with their presence. Stone held something in his hands, a small wooden box carefully carved and polished. "We had a team discussion." Hendricks began his usual command authority, softened by genuine emotion. "About what you did today, about what it means, about what we owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Elena started to say, but Stone interrupted. "Respectfully, ma'am, we do, and we need you to understand why." He opened the wooden box, revealing a challenge coin, but not standard issue. This was custom-made, clearly fabricated by the team itself. One side showed the SEAL trident, the other side was engraved with precise numbers: 52 kills, 12 hours, 69 lives. "This is from all of us," Stone continued. "From Havoc Team, and from every person in this facility who's alive because you were here. Challenge coins matter in military culture. They're not just metal. They're brotherhood. They're belonging. They're a statement that you're one of us regardless of uniform or official status." He placed the coin in Elena's hand, and she felt the weight of it, both the physical weight of metal and the symbolic weight of acceptance. "You might not wear the trident," Hendricks said, his voice carrying that gravel-edged emotion that comes from men who've seen too much death to be casual about life. "But you've earned the respect that goes with it. You're a SEAL in everything but paperwork, and we wanted you to know that." Young Dylan spoke up, his youth making him less practiced at suppressing feeling. "Ma'am, when I was pinned down today, when I thought I was going to die, I heard your voice on the radio, and I heard your rifle, and I thought maybe there was a chance. You gave us that chance. You gave us hope when there wasn't any. That's worth more than any medal or commendation." "Hoo-yah," the team said in unison, the traditional SEAL expression of affirmation spoken with genuine reverence. Elena looked at the coin, then at the 12 faces surrounding her, warriors who'd seen combat across multiple continents, men who'd earned their status through blood and sacrifice, and years of dedication to the hardest profession in existence. And they were calling her one of them. "Hoo-yah," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to crack her professional composure. The team relaxed slightly, the formality of the moment passing into something more comfortable. They talked for a while, trading stories, asking about her background, sharing their own experiences. It was the kind of conversation that happened after shared combat, when people who'd faced death together tried to reaffirm their humanity through connection. Eventually, they left her alone with her thoughts and her new challenge coin, and the understanding that she'd become part of something larger than herself. Colonel Hartwell found her an hour later, staring at the coin in the dim light. "They don't give those lightly," he observed, sitting down across from her. "Challenge coins from SEAL teams are earned, not awarded. The fact that they made one specifically for you says everything about how they view what you did." "I was just doing what needed to be done," Elena said, repeating the refrain that had become almost automatic. "No," Hartwell corrected gently. "You were doing what nobody else could do. That's different. That's why it matters." He pulled out an encrypted satellite phone, military-grade security, and placed it on the table. "Direct line to my office and to several other offices that officially don't communicate with contractors. When you need support, intelligence, logistics, extraction, call. The 12 SEALs aren't the only ones who owe you a debt." "I work alone, Colonel." "I know, but even lone wolves sometimes need a pack backing them up. Consider this your connection to resources when situations require more than one rifle and one operator." He stood to leave, then paused. "Whatever you're planning for Moscow, be careful. Dimitrov knows about you now. He'll be expecting retaliation. Don't let revenge cloud your tactical judgment." After he left, Elena sat alone with the coin, the phone, and the weight of decisions that would shape everything that followed. She thought about Rebecca, about her father, about all the people who'd died because the right person hadn't been in the right place at the right time. She thought about the 69 people alive tonight because she had been. And she thought about Lieutenant Morrison's sister, 22 years old and terrified, in a Moscow safe house waiting for rescue that official channels said would take months or might never come. A knock at her door pulled her from reflection. She opened it, expecting another debrief summons. Instead, Colonel Nathaniel Pierce stood there looking every one of his 68 years. He'd flown in on the QRF helicopters, unable to stay away once he'd heard what she'd done. "May I?" he asked. Elena stepped aside and Pierce entered, moving with the careful economy of age. He sat heavily studying the challenge coin in her hand. "Your father would be proud," Pierce said quietly. "Not of the killing," Richard hated violence, "but of the choice you made, to stand in the gap when no one else could." "I missed Dimitrov," Elena said, the failure still raw. "I had the shot, the wind shifted. He's alive because I missed. You'll get another chance. Men like him always come back." Pierce looked at her directly. "But I didn't come here to talk about Dimitrov. I came to tell you something I should have said years ago." Elena waited. "When Richard died, I promised to keep you safe. Instead, I turned you into a weapon. I taught you intelligence craft, pointed you toward violence, and told myself I was honoring your father's memory." His voice carried the weight of old guilt. "But what I really did was create the daughter I never had, one who could do the things I couldn't anymore. That was selfish, and I'm sorry." "Don't be," Elena said firmly. "You gave me purpose, direction, the skills to actually protect people instead of just analyzing threats from a distance. Dad believed in diplomacy. You taught me what happens when diplomacy fails. I needed both lessons." "Rebecca used to say the same thing," Pierce replied, "that you were the perfect synthesis, Richard's idealism with my pragmatism. She saw your potential before I did." At Rebecca's name, Elena's composure cracked slightly. "I'll find him, Pierce, Dimitrov, and next time the mission comes first," Pierce interrupted gently. "Not revenge, not closure. The mission. That's what separates you from men like Dimitrov. He sacrifices innocent people for his goals. You protect innocent people while achieving yours. Don't lose that distinction chasing vengeance." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 6 years' mentorship settling between them. "There's a medical team in Syria," Pierce said finally. "American doctors and nurses. ISIS forces are closing in. 20 minutes until they're overrun. Hartwell received the request 10 minutes ago. He's looking for you." Elena looked at her rifle, at the challenge coin, at the encrypted phone Pierce held out. Her shoulder ached, her eyes burned. Exhaustion threatened to overwhelm training and discipline. But somewhere in Syria, Americans were dying. "The helicopter's waiting," Pierce said. "If you want it, you've earned the right to say no, to rest, to let someone else carry the weight for once." Elena took the phone, checked the message, saw the faces of doctors, nurses, staff people who'd chosen to heal in a war zone, now about to be massacred for that choice. She thought about her father killed trying to build peace, about Rebecca killed protecting intelligence assets, about the 69 people alive tonight because she'd been in the right place, about the 8-year-old girl who'd decided that passivity was unacceptable. "There's always someone else," Elena said quietly. "But right now that someone is me." Pierce stood, his expression mixing pride with concern. "Then go. Save them. Come back alive. And Elena," he paused at the door, "when you finally face Dimitrov again, remember you're not doing it for Rebecca. You're doing it so no one else has to bury their mentor." He left and Elena was alone with her rifle and her choices. She packed methodically. Custom rifle, ammunition, equipment. The SEAL Challenge coin went in her pocket, a reminder that she wasn't as alone as she sometimes felt. The Montana night was cold as she walked toward the helicopter. Behind her, the facility hummed with life, dozens of people continuing their mission because she'd stood in the gap. Ahead lay Syria, then Moscow, then whatever came next. And somewhere in the darkness, Dimitrov was planning his revenge, not yet understanding that legends once created couldn't be destroyed, only faced. Elena Katharina Westbrook, the guardian angel, the wraith, the woman with one rifle who changed battlefields, she was just getting started. Her father had taught her idealism. Pierce had taught her pragmatism. Rebecca had taught her courage. The SEALs had taught her she belonged. And she'd taught herself the most important lesson, that sometimes one person in the right place at the right time with the will to act could tip the balance when everything seemed lost. The helicopter lifted off, banking towards Syria, and whatever impossible situation waited there. Elena checked her rifle one final time and feeling the familiar weight, the cold metal, the readiness. One shot at a time, one life saved at a time, one mission at a time, forever.